Good Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock, time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. A little later in the show, we will be joined by Jared Mueller, Dogs by Nature, talk a little bit about free agency, talk a little bit about the draft for the Browns coming up in a few weeks. We begin by talking Browns and some news out concerning Greg Newsome. Always some interesting stuff. So Greg Newsome has switched agents back to Drew Rosenhaus. Adam Schefter tweets this out. Amidst speculation that his client, Greg Newsome, wants to be traded, agent Drew Rosenhaus met today in Cleveland with the Browns to discuss Newsome's future role there. Greg is happy to be with the Browns. Rosenhaus said everything was positive. Greg is happy with his role and playing for new defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz. Some teammates getting involved as well. Juan Thornhill, new safety. My dog, Greg Newsome, ain't going nowhere, not on my watch. Newsome replies, we are here for the long haul family. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram as well as brownzone.com. Scott, Greg Newsome didn't come out and say he wants to trade, but you don't switch from Drew Rosenhaus to Clutch Sports back to Drew Rosenhaus, given that you're playing a position you've come out and said you don't really like playing if everything is going great.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, Dave. I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming up for Greg, right? Whether it's he's not entirely happy with his role with the Browns. He's entering his third year, so after that, he could start long-term contract extension talks. At some point, the Browns would have to decide whether to guarantee the fifth-year option on his rookie deal if they haven't agreed to a long-term deal. So, I think there's a lot going on there. But Greg came out on Twitter, you just showed it, and Drew Rosenhaus got back to me right away this morning, and I asked him if he'd requested a trade, and he said, no, I met with Andrew Bayer today, and Greg is in a good place with the team, happy to be with the Browns. So, either Greg has had positive meetings with Jim Schwartz or Rosenhaus has had positive meetings with the Browns, or they just realized that they don't have any leverage, and the best idea is to say you're happy and then address things at a later date.
Yeah, either way, there's not much they can do this year or really next year. That Drew Rosenhaus has a history of finding a way to get what he wants for his players, as is an agent's job.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, he's one of the super agents in the game, but it doesn't always happen. I know there's been other times where Drew wanted his guys out of Cleveland, and it hasn't happened, right? We know, I'm not saying David Njoku or Kareem Hunt were his guys, because they weren't, but we've seen the Browns hold firm on not trading guys that were unhappy and actually requested trades. And Drew's got a good relationship with the Browns. I mean, he's, for everything an agent is, I think he's well respected across the league. So, I think Greg probably feels like Drew can help him long term, and whether or not that's getting out of Cleveland, it sure doesn't feel like that right now.
And you know what? Let's say this. You certainly understand Greg Newsome's point of view. Slot corners get paid a whole lot less than guys on the outside.
Yeah, and I think you get beat up inside more. I mean, it's a tougher position to play. It's certainly not, right, the moneymaker that the outside guys are. And Greg was, I don't even know if in a tough spot, but certainly an unusual and a difficult situation. He starts outside, which is a premier position, and then you go inside. It's tough. It's different technique, outside and inside. He said at the beginning of the year he was excited to do it, and I think doing it for the whole season took a toll. I think he wants a little bit more stability, whether that's, hey, I'm going to play all on the outside, or maybe follow a guy, right? So if that guy's on the outside on first down and moves inside on third down, I go with him. Something where it's not just, okay, it's three wides, I'm inside, I'm taking a beating. You're almost like playing a mini linebacker. It's a tough spot to be in for a guy that's not that big.
Yeah, without question. All right, let's move on from that. And I know you've answered this in your mailbag. How do you think the Browns' defense projects coming up?
Yeah, I think there's reason to be optimistic, Dave, and it starts with Jim Schwartz, right? The coordinator change. We talk about there's a lot of unknowns this time of the year. Well, it doesn't feel like Jim Schwartz is an unknown. He's been doing this a long time. He feels, to me, like a significant upgrade over Joe Woods. And, that is a knock on Woods to some extent, but it's also just knowing how good Schwartz is and the career he's had, and he won a Super Bowl with the Eagles as a coordinator, went to the Super Bowl as a coordinator with the Titans, was a head coach for 5 years with the Lions. So I think that will help, period. And then you look at, okay, Myles Garrett is still going to be Myles Garrett. He's still in his prime. You get some young guys. Greg Newsome should be better. You would think Martin Emerson Jr. should be better. JOK. And then the additions, right? Dalvin Tomlinson, Obo at defensive end. Juan Thornhill at safety, you would hope, is an upgrade over John Johnson III. So, I think there's some unknowns and some uncertainty, but I certainly think there's plenty of reasons to expect the Browns to be significantly better.
So here's kind of what I come back to with that. What do you expect the Browns' identity to be defensively with Jim Schwartz? And then as a follow-up to that, could you tell me what it was with Joe Woods? I couldn't answer what their defense was with Joe Woods.
Yeah, that's interesting, Dave. I'll start with the second part. It almost felt like Joe Woods' calling card was, we're going to use a lot of DBs, right? They went to a lot of three safeties. They were in the dime a lot. And I don't even know if that counts as an identity, but that's something that he really relied upon and thought it was the right way to operate. And, I think that he had some success with it, but I don't think it was overwhelming success. I think it's hard to do that sometimes inside the AFC North when the Steelers go big personnel and the Ravens certainly go big personnel. And then when it comes to Jim Schwartz, it's attacking and not so much with the blitz. He doesn't blitz a ton. Now he will if he's got a lockdown secondary, and there's a potential for that at corner with the top three corners at least that the Browns have. But it's about attacking from the defensive line and having a big, long, strong, deep rotation along that front four. And I don't think the Browns are there yet. We talked about adding Tomlinson and Obo. I think they're still, and they've added more defensive tackles than that, right? Hurst and Tristan Hill. But it feels like there's even more room to add guys at D tackle. And I certainly think at D end, they need some more depth. But it's going to be your front four have to dominate, and they'll do it with the wide system and really attacking because it's all about the pass rush.
Yeah, and again, I think they're a step ahead because Jim Schwartz knows what he wants the defense to look like, and it's easy to see that. I don't know that maybe some of the miscommunication with Joe Woods is he couldn't tell you what he wanted the defense to look like.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not saying you're wrong there. I do think that, it's weird because I think the Browns have smart guys, right? But you hear guys at the end of the year talk about simplifying, and when Woods would simplify, they'd be better. And I think it's realistic to think that Schwartz will simplify things. And he'll say, this is what we do. Let's still go do it great. And if, it's not complicated, maybe some offenses figure some stuff out, but it doesn't matter if your front four is winning down in and down out. So I do think there's a lot better chance for the Browns to have fewer of those big miscommunications that really did them in early in last season and early in the season before.
Yeah, I would agree. Before we go to break, and again, I know you've done this on your mailbag, what player do you think could have a breakout season that surprises some folks?
Yeah, and I went with Jerome Ford, the running back / kickoff returner, just because I think his role is going to go up so much from last year to this year. As a rookie, he returned 30 kicks, and I think he had 8 touches on offense for 12 yards, right? 8 carries for 12 yards. Now, if he's the number 2 guy, and he certainly is on the depth chart right now, I think there'll be competition added. I'd expect the Browns to draft somebody. But let's assume it's Jerome Ford is the number 2 back to Nick Chubb. That means he's getting, probably a series is the feature back. Is it every quarter, every third or fourth possession? And then you're playing a lot as the third down back. And you get opportunities in that role. So, and I think he'll also have a chance to return kicks. And if you combine all that, liked what I saw out of him in the preseason last year, liked what I saw out of him as a kick returner. The Browns coaches like him because they're leaning toward giving him this, this role, which is a premium role that was filled by Kareem Hunt for the last however many years. I think he has a chance to make a big jump.
I'm with you, and I know a couple of your other picks were Perrion Winfrey, Alex Wright. I think if one of those two happens, I think this defense could end up being a pretty big surprise. If you get one of those young guys that figures it out pretty quickly with Jim Schwartz, that's going to be really good for this team.
Yeah, because I think both those guys are going to play, right? At least they're in the rotation right now. So yeah, if you have one of those two guys take a big step, I was going to say like Elijah Moore or even Ovo, because I think those guys can have big years in increased roles, but they're more well known. I don't know if it'd be a huge surprise.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, what does it mean to be in the shotgun for Nick Chubb? It's not all bad. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Great Lakes Collectors Convention, presented by Greenie Sports Cards, takes over the Fieldhouse in Independence, Ohio, where the passions of sports fans, collectors, and sports talk enthusiasts collide. 50,000 square feet of ball card bliss. Hundreds of display tables. Card Shop Live Theater with interactive appearances from the region's most notable sports media. Great cards, great location, great show. Tickets on sale now at greeniesportscards.com.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. So there's a lot that's been made about Nick Chubb running out of the shotgun. Take a look at this. He has played 25% of the snaps he's run out of the shotgun in his career. Averaged 5.7 yards a carry. It's more than half a yard more than under center. You see 31%, 31.5% on first down, 37.8% of his total yards rushing. Scott, that was a little bit earlier in his career, not the last couple of years, but I think we're making a lot more out of running out of the shotgun. It is an adjustment, but it's one that a running back like Nick Chubb will make.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked Nick about that and Kevin Stefanski about that, and they both don't think it's that big a deal, right? Not that they outright dismiss it, but Nick says he's fine doing whatever. Stefanski says, Chubb is comfortable in whichever role, is successful in however he gets the ball. I think it's maybe more of an adjustment with the timing with the O-line. There's a little bit there. I think he'll be fine. I think you're going to have to he's going to have to get used to, fans are going to have to get used to the line. Just, a shift in philosophy. It'll probably throw first. It'll be a lot of Deshaun Watson, and then you turn it over to Nick Chubb maybe later in games. And I think a lot of those stats are, okay, when it looks like a passing situation, you hand it to Chubb, and he has success that way. And if the Browns do come out and have success throwing early, and teams have to respect that, then you can have the same type of situation where defenses are on their heels, and you hand it off to Chubb, and there's a big lane, he has room to run, and we all know that he has success anytime that's the case.
Yeah, and the other thing is if you spread it out and you're going three wides, you're spreading the defense out. It's not like they're going to say, we're just going to let that receiver that's spread out 8 yards, we're not going to cover him. So you're taking people out of the box by doing that.
Yeah, right. If you're successful throwing the ball, and the Browns are balanced back and forth, right? We all know they love their tight ends, and they would do, 12 and 13 personnel, but they also had plenty of games, and I'm thinking of, I think in Green Bay that one Christmas where they should have won, they really went a lot of three wides and spread out the Packers and had success running the ball. So they've done it both ways. I think Chubb will be successful doing whatever. But those stats should be reassuring for some fans that are really worried about it.
So, again, I know this from your mailbag. Have the Browns had any contact with Kareem Hunt? We're starting to hear. Do you think they want to bring him back? What are you hearing with that?
Yeah, I don't know for sure whether or not they have or have not. Andrew Berry always talks to the agents right before free agency starts saying, here's our position. I just think it's a long shot. And I know some fans want to see him back, and I get it. He played really well here. He's from here. I get all the reasons. He plays really hard. But it feels like a long shot to me. And the biggest reason, and we probably talked about this before, Dave, is, when you make $6 million a year and the team says, we don't want you, it's awful hard to come back and say, yeah, I'll play for $2 million. Whether or not that's all you get anywhere else, it's just a tough adjustment from an ego standpoint. I think from a human nature standpoint. We saw it before with Jarvis Landry, Sheldon Richardson, a couple of guys that the Browns cut, and then they hung out on the free agent market for a long time. And might even taken less money to go elsewhere just because it's so hard to say, hey, this team just paid me this, and now they're going to pay me this. So I think that's the first hurdle. I think the Browns like Jerome Ford. I don't think they want to pay for a backup running back. They're already paying Chubb a bunch of money. We know that they're paying Watson and a bunch of other guys a lot of money. So, I think there'd have to be a big shift in mentality on both sides for it to work out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't see a way for it to happen, but as you know, never say never. Do you think Harrison Bryant has fallen out of favor?
Yeah, it was interesting how one of the readers phrased that. I don't want to make it sound like he did anything to upset the organization, because I don't think he has. He's a great teammate. Guys like him. The coaching staff loves him. He works really hard. Having said that, his production hasn't increased like the Browns hoped it would. It's been around like 25 to 28 catches, less than 300 yards. I think he had one touchdown last year. He just really hasn't taken that big step up. And, he's got good hands, but I think he's limited kind of athletically. He's limited from a physical standpoint. He doesn't dominate as a blocker like, David Njoku's kind of grown into being a really good blocker. Pharaoh Brown, I think, had the reputation of being a big-time blocker. And Bryant just doesn't have that body type. So I think the Browns realized that he was limited. And then when the Jordan Akins free agent became available, they said they went out and signed him. And I fully expect him to jump ahead of Bryant on the depth chart. So, I think his role will go down, but that's not like a knock on him personally. I just think as a player, the Browns were looking to upgrade.
Would it surprise you at all if he's part of like a draft night trade? I could see them attaching him to like a third-round pick trying to move up, something along those lines.
Yeah. No, I could see that, certainly. And he had really good college credentials, right? He was like tight end of the year. I mean, had big numbers. So, yeah, I could see him being moved there or being moved right before the season, maybe goes through training camp. I think the Browns need some depth at tight end, especially if they move on from Bryant. It's a deep draft for tight ends, so I could certainly see there being some movement there.
Let's take a look at this. So we've talked a little bit about a Donovan Peoples-Jones extension in the past. What would it look like? So this is from Jack Duff and Orange and Brown report. Renfro, $15.85 million. Allen Robinson, $15.5 million. OBJ and Sutton in the $15 million range. You've got Russell Gage, $8.5 million. Juju Smith-Schuster, $8.5 million. He's coming to a number of between $10 and $12.5 million a year for a Donovan Peoples-Jones extension. What are your thoughts on that? He's been productive to a point. I look at that number and it's like, wow, that's kind of more than I thought it would be.
That's the same reaction I had, Dave. He's been good. I thought he took a big step last year, solidified himself as definitely a part of the rotation, even if you don't think he's a true number two. The combination of him and Elijah Moore, 2 and 3, I think is really strong. Opposite, Amari Cooper or behind Amari Cooper. But double digits, it seems like a lot of money to me. It really does. Right now, I can't see the Browns paying that. I don't think they want to get in a situation where they pay both receivers $10+ million a year. They didn't like doing it when they had Landry and Beckham. I don't think they're going to like doing it with, X and Y. Amari Cooper and whoever that other guy would be. So I don't. This is a case where they'll be able to work out a deal where it's less for him to stay, or it's a case where he's going to finally hit the free agent market and have to be paid somewhere else.
Yeah, and again, the wide receiver market a year ago kind of blew up. It's been flatter this year. You just year to year, you just never know how that's going to shake down. The Browns have had a pretty good feel for those kind of markets the last couple of years. It'll be interesting to see what is that price going to keep going up for wide receivers.
Yeah, and there's a surprise every year, right? Christian Kirk kind of messed up the market, not in his opinion, but for a lot of teams in 2022 offseason. And then, I was stunned Odell got the money he got from Baltimore. So I know there's not, those aren't the same circumstances, but to feel like there's surprises, Hardman didn't get a huge contract this year. So you just never know how it's going to play out. But it sure feels like even if this draft there's a little dip in the receiver class, it feels like there's a lot coming out in the draft every year, which unless you're an elite guy like an Amari Cooper, like a Jamar Chase, I think it's tougher for that second-level guy to get paid.
Yeah. And again, I know this is from one of your mailbags. Do you think the Browns' offense can score 400 points next season? Let's preface it by saying they scored 361 with Jacoby Brissett starting 11 games. And nothing against Jacoby Brissett. He played well.
Yeah, I certainly think that they need to, right, if they're going to meet expectations. It's not a ton of points a game. I think it's 24-ish. I should do the math real quick. I did it for the mailbag, but it's just not a ton of points. They're playing 17 games now, so that's 23.5, right? Like that feels like a number you should be able to reach if you have a big-time quarterback and a big-time offense like the Browns think they will have. So I don't know how often they've gotten to that number, but it doesn't seem outlandish to me, and it feels like kind of a realistic goal to set.
Yeah, I would almost think if they don't, you start to wonder, are they going to get where they want to go, which is the playoffs and beyond?
Right, especially, we all know the NFL is more scoring than ever, right? So if it's tougher to play defense, you're going to give up. If the defense gives up 21 points, you kind of like, okay, that's a good game. So in order to be better than that, you better be around 24 a game.
Yeah, I agree with you. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, we will continue talking Browns. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
The Great Lakes Collectors Convention, presented by Greenie Sports Cards, takes over the Fieldhouse in Independence, Ohio, where the passions of sports fans, collectors, and sports talk enthusiasts collide. 50,000 square feet of ball card bliss. Hundreds of display tables. Card Shop Live Theater with interactive appearances from the region's most notable sports media. Great cards, great location, great show. Tickets on sale now at greeniesportscards.com.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Scott, again, I know this is one of the questions from your mailbag. Jedrick Wills, fifth-year option is due. Do you have any sense of how that is getting ready to play out?
Yeah, I certainly expect the Browns to pick it up. Every time Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski's been asked about Wills during the offseason, they've always been really positive. Thought he took a big step last year, which I think was important because he was injured a lot in that 2021 season. Didn't play close to his potential. I talked to him before last season. He had been careful the year before because he didn't want to re-injure the ankle. So he would, block early and then kind of be careful of the ankle. So I think he played harder last year. I think he played better. There's certainly room for improvement. There's no doubt about that. And I think Wills would admit that. I know the Browns believe that. But I think the confidence in Wills is way higher in the building than it is in fandom, or at least according to the people you see on Twitter. So I fully expect the option to be picked up. It's guaranteed now. So the team, Dolphins are an exception with Tua, but I think the Browns will wait till the last minute just so nothing crazy happens. And then on May 1st, they'll pick up that fifth-year option. And then if he plays well, they'll talk about a long-term extension during or after the 23 season.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And, the the confidence in Wills is where it needs to be within the organization. Let's take a look at this. This is kind of interesting. Highest paid players by position. This is from ESPN.com. And this is total guaranteed money. And you see Deshaun Watson has the most guaranteed for a quarterback, $230 million. I looked at Kyler Murray, and it's almost $190 guaranteed, and he tore his ACL. You see Russell Wilson with that guarantee in his age. So, again, the guaranteed money for Watson, a big deal made of. Let's take a look at cornerback. Again, most guaranteed goes to a Brown, Denzel Ward, $71.25 million, just ahead of Ramsey, Marlon Humphrey for Baltimore at almost $67 million. Andrew Berry said, they were going to take care of their guys and make sure they kept them around long term, and he has set to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, Ward was the number 4 pick in the draft. Obviously, previous regime. Played really well here. I think last year struggled a little bit early. I thought he played better as the season went on. Corner is such a tough spot, right? You make a mistake, people see it, it's obvious. I never, personally as a guy just observing, lost confidence in Ward. I always thought he was fine. He's incredibly gifted. He's got really good ball skills. I think he played better as the end of the season went on. That doesn't mean there's not pressure on him this year to kind of reestablish himself as a top, 5'10" guy, top corner in the league, a Pro Bowler. Because he's getting paid like it. But when he signed the contract, the extension, it made sense. He was one of your guys. He was playing really well. The guys who signed the latest gets the most money. So all of that makes sense. He's still incredibly young. So. I don't think anybody's lost confidence inside the building with Ward, but if the public confidence has waned, then I think maybe this is an important year just to reestablish himself as, yes, he's a legitimate number 1 lockdown corner. And if he plays like that with Newsome and Emerson as your other 2 guys, that's a big time cornerback group.
The other thing is I think Jim Schwartz helps the style of cornerbacks that the Browns have as well. I think what he's going to ask them to do is those are the skills that they want to show.
Yeah, that's probably true. It'll be interesting, because we all know about the front and just how does he use those guys, right? Does he say, hey, I've got incredibly gifted corners. I'm going to play a lot of man and then maybe blitz some linebackers, right? Or blitz some safeties. Or does he say, hey, I'm going to play bump and let my attack with the front and have the safety over the top? Just how he uses them will be interesting, but I think all 3 guys have a skill set that is versatile enough to play whatever system Schwartz wants to play.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that unfolds as the season goes along. This is from the 33rd team, so these are former NFL executives. Biggest draft mistakes for each and every team. For the Browns, they go with Johnny Manziel, 2014, number 22 overall. I'm going to disagree. I'm going to stay in the same draft and go with Justin Gilbert. And here's a look at who Justin Gilbert was taken ahead of. Aaron Donald, Odell Beckham, Taylor Lewan, Eric Ebron, Anthony Barr, C.J. Mosley, Zach Martin. When you look at that, what were they thinking with Justin Gilbert? I mean, and you look at Manziel, and there aren't as many guys that jump out. Teddy Bridgewater, of course, jumps out. But, man, you whiffed on number 8, especially when the immediately following that were some guys that have become perennial All-Pros.
Well, right. And they traded out of 4, right? They could have taken Khalil Mack, I think, at 4 if they wanted to. Yeah, I don't like to throw dysfunctional around too much. I know that's a popular word to describe the Browns, but that was kind of the pinnacle of the dysfunction in the organization, right? I mean, Ray Farmer, you hear stories that they didn't even do a lot of research on Justin Gilbert, right? Because if you talk to anybody at Oklahoma State, they would have given all kinds of red flags, and yet they take him number 8. The guy did not have a big love for football. I remember him telling me at the end of his rookie year, that he had a hard time waking up to come to work. And he said it kind of matter of fact, yeah, I just have a hard time getting up and coming here. All right. You kind of knew right then it wasn't going to get any better, right? And then the Manziel, whether the ownership moved in and had a big influence on that, With Ray Farmer as the GM. I don't know if he ever really loved Johnny. I know Mike Pettin never seemed like a big fan of Johnny. So I think that those two picks, and the amazing thing is then Joe Petonio was the next pick, one of the better picks of the whole organization since '99. So they stumbled into Petonio, but that first round was just a disaster.
Yeah, that's awful. All right, before I let you go, what positions do you see Andrew Berry addressing in this draft, and what do you think they need to address in the draft?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Dave, because they have 8 picks, but I don't think there's 8 spots, like roster spots, right? So I think they'll trade 1 or 2 looking to get an extra pick in 2024. Maybe they trade a couple picks and move up back in the second round or higher into the third round. I could certainly see that. But having said that, I think there's still needs at D tackle, D end. I would probably put D end ahead of D tackle just because there's not as much depth. You have Myles Garrett and Obo, and then it's Alex Wright and Isaiah Thomas. I think you need to add to that pile. I think they need another linebacker to add to the group because guys have been injured. The Anthony Walker Jr., Sione Takitaki, even Joe O'Kay, Jacob Phillips, sure. All 4 of those guys were on IR to end the year. I think maybe one more receiver. We talked about tight end earlier. A swing tackle, that seems like a spot that they need to upgrade. So they still have needs. Now, I don't know if there's a pressing need where you say, this is a spot you have to take, because I think they did address most spots in free agency. But I think they can add to the pile at, a handful of positions.
Scott Petrak, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Browns beat reporter, Elyria Chronicle Telegram. You can check him out on the internet, brownzone.com as well. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Jared Mueller from Dogs by Nature. We continue talking Browns. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's welcome in Jared Mueller from Dogs by Nature. Jared, when you look at the wide receiver room, if you will, and the additions of Elijah Moore, Marquise Goodwin, just your reaction to what Andrew Berry and the front office has done.
I think what they've really done is said speed is going to be important. The ability to win quickly is something Elijah Moore does a great job at. While his size says slot receiver, he plays well in the slot, but also outside because he's got a lot of deep speed as well. And obviously that's where Goodwin really wins as well, as he's that Olympic sprinter style, straight down the field kind of player. Has some injury history. He's a little bit older. I don't actually believe he's officially even signed his contract yet. But those are two players that tell you The Browns want to be explosive. They want players who can make plays with the ball in their hand, can really stretch the field. And what it's going to do is give Deshaun Watson a lot more space to work within the offense when you have a lot of players who can really make an impact with their speed and their quickness.
You mentioned, the win quickly for Elijah Moore. That means easy yards. That's something this offense really wasn't able to do a season ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at some level, it's why they missed Jarvis Landry, except Elijah Moore hopefully can get that 4-yard reception and turn it into 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 yards, whereas Landry is going to turn that 4-yard reception into 5 yards. So they just didn't really have that first down getter, right? And that's exactly what I think Elijah Moore does. And then someone like Goodwin is really a lot of what they kind of hoped Anthony Schwartz would become, that deep speed, take the safety has to pay attention to, and really open up some of the underneath stuff. So all in all, Marcus Goodwin on a fade route could be a very quick throw, even though it ends up 30 yards down the field, just because he is that fast. Deshaun Watson putting some air under the ball, and then Moore can do the same thing. But really where I think he's going to really excel is just those option routes out of the slot to get that first down and then some.
The thing, as you're saying that, the quick throws and the recognition is something that Deshaun Watson was really good at in Houston that we didn't see a lot of last year in the Browns offense.
Yeah, he looked like someone who was thinking. And unfortunately, when it comes to, and it's kind of like a Major League Baseball fastball, like you have no clue how fast that is until you really are in there. Same kind of thing with defense. They have 1.8 seconds, 2.1 seconds to take the snap, evaluate any rotation, and then make a decision. There's a lot going on there. And so you really can't be thinking much when you're out there. You have to be reacting. And so Watson just wasn't in a position where he was reacting. He was thinking through everything. And then he turned to his legs maybe a little more often than we would like because he just wasn't sure of everything he saw, wasn't sure of his receivers and some of the things they were doing. You just saw a lot of uncertainty.
All right, let's move on to free agency. Do you think Andrew Berry has a signing left? Is there one or two guys that you think there's still some money? Do you think he goes out and brings somebody in?
I do. I think there's at least one guy in the next couple of weeks. We saw the Al Woods visit, and that kind of gives us that inclination that they still want something there on the defensive line. He'd be obviously that nose tackle, a little bit of an older veteran. And then I think the other thing, maybe a trade, something maybe even a little bigger, comes after June 1st when they get, that $10+ million from the John Johnson III and Jadeveon Clowney releases. That money doesn't actually get freed up until after June 1st. So I think if they want to do something a little bit bigger, you're going to have to wait a little while other teams kind of figure out, who do they get in the draft, all of that kind of stuff. But I do think he has a move or two left, maybe a free agent, and then maybe some kind of trade to bring in somebody that another team just replaced in the draft.
So along those lines, I know you've written an article, Dogs by Nature, 5 defensive tackles still available for the Browns to sign, and we'll run through the names. You mentioned one of them, Al Woods. We know about the visit. They will revisit it, they said. Ashawn Robinson, another name we've talked about a lot. Akeem Hicks. Matt Ioannidis has been a popular name last few years connected with the Browns. And then Poona Ford. So as we go through those, we know there's an interest in Woods. He's been here. He's met. Who do you think makes sense? Who do you think might be on their list pretty high there?
I think what makes the most sense is Ioannidis, only because he really is the real 3 technique of that group. The rest are going to play a little bit more nose tackle, take on blocks, eat up space kind of thing. And right now they have a few of those players. They've added, I think Dalvin Tomlinson can play both roles. But I think Tristan Hill is a player that's really going to kind of be that nose tackle. And so I think adding another 3 technique that can at least get some pressure on the quarterback and really kind of split those blockers, I think that just fits. The rest, again, Al Woods is a nose tackle, those kind of things. I think they could help, but I'm not sure it's as helpful, as impactful as more of a 3 technique would be. But at this point, for most of those guys, including, Poona Ford is such an interesting player at 5'11", over 300 pounds, who has played well in the NFL, but doesn't really fit kind of from a size perspective. I think for most of them at this point, they're probably better off waiting until the draft so that teams miss out on some players and then come back to them with an extra maybe $500,000 to another $1 million on that contract.
Yeah, that makes sense. You also wrote an article about 6 defensive ends that would still be available for the Browns, and we'll run through them. Frank Clark, a Cleveland area kid, has some Super Bowl history with the Chiefs. Yannick Ngakoue, undersized edge rusher, it's a guy the Browns have flirted with in free agency in the past. Bud Dupree, Leonard Floyd, another name that is pretty familiar to Browns fans. Marcus Golden, Melvin Ingram, 34 years old, has been productive the last couple of stops. Of those guys, and I think they need to add a veteran guy, edge makes a lot of sense. Who do you think fits best of those 6?
For me, it is Leonard Floyd. I think he's, at 30 years old, he's still got some gas in the tank. With edge rushers, different than defensive tackle, you still need kind of that explosiveness. You need that ability to get off the ball. Frank Clark, I just don't feel like he has a lot left in him. Ngakoue, literally, if he is on the field, they're going to run the ball right at him. He's just a little lean. So even if he is producing 9.5 sacks, the other team's just going to learn not to run the ball or not to throw the ball with him on the field. And then Golden and Ingram, I just don't think either of them, to the level that you would want, are going to produce the same way we've seen Leonard Floyd. I just wonder what he wants to do at this point in his career. Got the Super Bowl with the Rams. Kind of what is he looking for? Because the rest of the guys, I think Ngakoue is looking for a little bit of a higher contract than the Browns or any team is really going to do. And the rest are, again, going to kind of wait things out. I think Floyd could be the really interesting buy maybe after the draft. But he's someone who I would pursue now because I agree with you. Right now, it's Myles Garrett, Okoronkwo, and then it's Alex Wright and Isaiah Thomas. Literally, they don't have another defensive end on their roster right now. Adding another veteran to allow Alex Wright and Isaiah Thomas as second-year players to kind of play their roles, I think could be really helpful.
Yeah, I'm with you. Jared Mueller from Dogs by Nature and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll take a look at some draft guys that you might want to avoid and some guys that the Browns might be targeting. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Jared Mueller from Dogs by Nature. So this is each team's draft value for the upcoming draft. And when you look at it, the Browns actually have more draft value than the Bengals, 49ers, Bills, Ravens, Vikings, Broncos, and Dolphins, which is a little bit of a surprise. But Jared, it kind of goes back to how Andrew Berry has constructed some of the traits that he's made.
It does, and that chart, the Fitzgerald Spielberger chart, really does a good job of understanding the value of a pick, not from players and who do you want and all of that, but really from what has produced in the past. So a third-round pick has this value because on average it has produced this value on the field. Different than the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, which was really about a lot about the first round picks and everybody else. So it is really interesting to see 2/3, 2/4, and how that value adds up over a Bengals team who has, I believe they have all of their draft picks, but they're all later in the round because, they were good and actually made the playoffs and all of the good things that we hope the Browns will do. So it's just a really interesting look at maybe not from a value that this is how a trade would happen, but this is where you expect value in the draft, third, fourth, fifth rounds, and it all adds up after a while.
This is from the Bleacher Report. It's kind of interesting. So these are prospects for the Browns to avoid in the 2023 draft. They say wide receiver Tank Dell, 5'8" is what he goes. Some concern whether his size could prevent him from being successful in the NFL. Zach Harrison didn't put up huge sack numbers during his time with the Buckeyes, notching only 11 in 40 career games. And Trey Dean, the third safety from Florida, may not be the best fit in Cleveland. Team should be looking for speed in the back half of their secondary. I get I can't argue with Tank Dell. I've kind of thought the same thing. Harrison's the one that's kind of intriguing just because the measurables are really interesting, and you wonder, can a guy like Jim Schwartz coach him up?
Yeah, so Tank Dell for me is interesting just because you can't teach speed, right? So you got to at least look at what can he do, and really good offensive coordinators and offensive coaches put players in position to do exactly what they can do. So if you get Tank Dell on some streaks, some 9 routes, you put him in some wide receiver screen action, he might be useful. For me, size isn't as important as how you use it. Which goes to Zach Harrison. Zach Harrison has all the measurables, but I think it's really hard to teach bend, right? And so from a defensive end perspective, if you don't have bend to be able to get around the corner, all of a sudden your moves and your counter moves are very, very limited. I'm not saying he's going to be this player, but Harrison reminds me a lot of Jadeveon Clowney in that he's going to push the pocket, right? He might get pressure through long arms and bull rushes and some of that kind of stuff, but he's not going to get around the end. He's not going to cause chaos in the backfield. He would allow Myles Garrett to cause chaos, right? He's the kind of defensive end that's going to set the edge. So it really depends on where you're going to draft that player. If that player is 74 overall, well, you want someone who's going to make a little bit more of an impact, at least with some pressures and those kind of things. If he is your 4th round pick, all of a sudden there's some value there. So for Harrison, it's all about where is he selected. I think many people think he's going to be a 3rd round pick based on kind of those skills that you talk about. And then Trey Dean, very, very versatile player. I'm not sure he's anything more than Ronnie Harrison at this point in time. Some injury issues, those kind of things. I like a versatile player. If you have something that you do really, really well, came into Florida as a cornerback, played safety, played linebacker at some level in the way their scheme is set up, but really doesn't have a position that he is then versatile out of. He's just kind of moved around a lot.
Yeah, you know what? That's a fair point. Where you draft somebody is as important as if you're drafting them. Very well, yeah, that's really good. This is from something that you wanted to talk about. 3 unique-sized defensive linemen. So we have Eddie Tamiwa from Northwestern, Tui Pulutu. I knew you gave me these just to see me pronounce them. Just to pronounce them. And then Carl Brooks. I nailed that one from Bowling Green.
Yeah, you killed it. I think what's really interesting in this draft class is all 3 of these guys at different levels have been talked about as late 1st, more likely 2nd and 3rd round picks, but none of them are really traditional. And so when you look at Adatame, he likes to go by Tommy at some level. This is a player who played defensive end, could play defensive tackle, but is just 6'2", 282 pounds. He doesn't exactly fit either defensive end or defensive tackle. He needs to be a little bit heavier or a little bit taller for either one of those. Doesn't have the best arm length, but then you go to Tuipulotu. I'm close on that one. And then you have someone who's 266, just 6'3", and only has 32-inch arms. So all of a sudden you have another player who, he had 12.5 sacks last year at USC, got a lot of pressures, but doesn't exactly fit kind of what NFL teams are looking for from those pure measurables. Again, I'm going to end with Carl Brooks here in a second, but Joe Thomas is a great example. Many people thought he didn't have the arm length to play left tackle and thought he needed to be moved inside to a guard. And we know how that always worked out. But when you look at a draft, when players don't fit, NFL teams start to slide them down, right? If they don't hit certain measurables, certain marks, all of a sudden a player who, at least the first two, I wouldn't expect to be anywhere near the Browns pick based on their talent, some of their testing measurables, all of that stuff, all of a sudden are falling maybe into the third round. And all of a sudden the Browns have access to some players, maybe through a trade up, that are better than you would expect. And then the local product, Carl Brooks, didn't get invited to the combine because at 6'3" and over 300 pounds, Carl Brooks is a defensive end, has played defensive end, plans to play defensive end, has tested out with some athleticism that he could play defensive end, and may not have kind of the muscle, the strength to play defensive tackle. So I brought up these three only because at least maybe two out of the three, or maybe all three, are ones that fans have heard their names and might think, why would we even talk about them? But these are three players who just don't fit a profile, right? You don't have 300-pound defensive ends. You especially don't have 6'3", 300-pound defensive ends. Your defensive ends are going to be 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", long arms, right? Your defensive tackles are going to be beefy, a little bit of height, all of that. And so I could see all three of these players falling farther than anybody would expect currently based on mock drafts, just because they don't fit those profiles.
All right, along those lines, there are some guys you like that are a little undersized that play with a little bit of an edge. Catrell Clark, Ivan Pace, Deuce Vaughn. Take us through what you like about those guys.
And I think, when we look at, especially defense and running backs are two of those attitude kind of things, right? When you're Catrell Clark, you're a slot corner, Louisville. When you're not the size, you're not the strength, you got to have a little fight in you, right? And then you have Ivan Pace, Cincinnati kid, interviewed him at the combine. And when he was asked about being undersized and guards getting on him and swallowing him up, he said, I just go right through their face and I haven't had a problem, in my entire career, and I'm going to keep doing that. And he mentioned someone like David Long. You just see with Ivan Pace, both on the field and in his interview, a player that plays with a chip on his shoulder and plays with attitude. And so one of the things I say all the time about draft picks, size is not a skill. It's a trait. It's important. It can be very, very helpful, but it's not a skill. And so, and then you get to Deuce Vaughn. I've heard lots of little nicknames for him, Pocket Hulk, because at 5'5", you better be Darren Sproles. And the reality is he has been Darren Sproles. He is a great route runner, great hands, has run for a ton of yardage, can pass protect. Pass protection can be about leverage, right? And so when you're 5'5", you got some leverage on some players. So these are just three guys as fans. One of the things I think it's important in the media is that we do some educating, right? And so in this way, just because a player doesn't measure up, all three of these players play much bigger than their size, and they're players that, again, will fall because of their size. And I would love to see the Browns snatch up all three of these guys. I think that would make a huge impact, both from the attitude perspective, and they're just really talented players who just happen to be smaller than most people like.
Well, and that's a perfect tease, because we're going to take a quick time out. Coming back on the other side, a mock draft that Jared Mueller has done for Dogs by Nature. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back talking Browns and Jared's mock draft. Stay with us.
The Great Lakes Collectors Convention, presented by Greeny Sports Cards, takes over the Fieldhouse in Independence, Ohio, where the passions of sports fans, collectors, and sports talk enthusiasts collide. 50,000 square feet of ball card bliss. Hundreds of display tables. Card Shop Live Theater with interactive appearances from the region's most notable sports media. Great cards, great location, great show. Tickets on sale now at greenysportscards.com.
We continue talking Browns with Jared Mueller from Dogs by Nature. So Jared has done a mock draft, the latest one, round 3. He has the Browns taking a defensive tackle from Florida, Garvon Dexter. with the first of their round 3 picks, and then Marvin Mims, wide receiver from the Oklahoma Sooners, with the second of their third-round picks. So take us through what you like about Dexter and Mims, Jared.
You know, Dexter is a player who, this is someone who has the traits and has the ability and has shown it on the field and just needs consistency. So he's a player I think is going to really benefit from a Dalvin Tomlinson to teach him kind of the nuances of the position. But at 6'6", he has the burst, the quickness off the ball. He just hasn't put it all together at Florida, which Florida has been up and down, more down over the last few years. But that's a player with some traits that I think when you look at where the Browns are kind of from a long-term perspective, slowly but surely, Tomlinson is going to be more of their one technique nose tackle. They need really a true 3 technique. Jim Schwartz wants a player that can get after the quarterback, and I think Dexter can play that role. Just needs a little time to develop and get that consistency. And then with Mims, we know they like the Sooners, right? They pulled in some of those guys last year. Mims is a better player than Michael Woods II, and we saw some flashes from Woods, obviously the Achilles injury. I think he's a player that can kind of give you the versatility that during his good years of Rashard Higgins gave you, has enough over the top and can give some really good route running, but can play in the slot. He's not the biggest receiver, not the fastest receiver. He's a good receiver who's going to catch the ball. I think he's a little more dynamic than David Bell. So he's just another player adding to that roster of wide receivers to make sure that Deshaun Watson has every opportunity to be successful.
When we look at your mock draft for round 4, a couple of guys we talked about last segment. So Carl Brooks, edge rusher from Bowling Green, and then linebacker Ivan Pace from Cincinnati. And you mentioned David Woods. That's a guy that's had success in a Jim Schwartz defense that Jim Schwartz pointed out he liked.
Yeah. I think these guys fit really perfectly. Again, I'm looking, the draft is about the future. I know fans want players that can play right away, but the draft is about the future. Free agency is about the now. And so Carl Brooks, listen, he's an interesting player with an interesting physical size, productivity, can get him here in the 4th round. Listen, if I can get a 6'6" guy on the on the interior and a 300-pounder on the edge, all of a sudden I've kind of mixed things up a little bit, and I can do a few different things with players that normally are going to kind of switch those around. And then Ivan Pace, Schwartz talked about long. He doesn't care about size. He cares about a player who knows how to play the position. Having him sit behind Anthony Walker, learn from Anthony Walker. I think, again, you don't have a middle linebacker for next year, or I'm sorry, for the year after this. So 2024, you need to start planning there. And I think Ivan Pace is a player that will do that and be able, Ohio guy from kind of the Southwest, move him up a little bit, let him learn, can be helpful on special teams right away. I think you're just getting a style of player that Jim Schwartz will love.
Yeah, and, I'll throw another Ohio guy, London Fletcher. They said the same thing about him, and he had about a 13-year career with the Washington football team. That has been pretty good. All right, round 5. Let's look at what you had in your mock draft round 5. You got a running back from Georgia, Kenny McIntosh, and then a corner I know you like, Ketrell Clark from Louisville.
Yeah, listen, I'll bang the Ketrell Clark bandwagon the entire draft. I want him. He's my Antoine Winfield of a few years ago, junior, who I wanted to come. But I think Kenny McIntosh is a really interesting one. Running back is one of the few positions that Andrew Berry did not add to this offseason. And so really right now, looks like Demetric Felton is planning to be a wide receiver. And so you're looking at Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, John Kelly. Like, you don't have a lot there. So I think using a 5th-round pick on Kenny McIntosh, who sat behind a lot of really good running backs at Georgia, he told me that he was okay with that. Like, he waited his time, but I just don't think he's produced as much because he just wasn't used as much. I think he's quick. I think he's good out of the backfield. I think he can give you a third down back right away. Here in the 5th round, again, you have 6 picks in this little section. Get some players that might be able to help right away, but also can develop over time. You still need running backs. You still need running backs who can catch the ball out of the backfield. You hope that's going to be Ford and McIntosh, and Nick Chubb just stays as your primary runner.
Jared Mueller, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Jared.
Absolutely, Dave. Always good to see you.
All right, Jared Mueller, make sure you check him out. Always great stuff, Dogs by Nature. You heard his stuff with free agency and the draft. Always really insightful. Make sure you check him out. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.